Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of the Back to Homeschool series. It is 4 parts. We have done the financial one, Money Matters, last Tuesday, and today we are here with Theresa, all about transforming your home. My name's Laura Gonzalez. I am a realtor and co-founder of With Purpose Realty here in San Diego, California. And I'm really passionate about making education on wealth and smart living accessible to all, which is why I've created these 4-part series for you. And today our guest is going to talk to us about home organization. So Theresa is an intentional home organizer. She's going to help us navigate through topics like how to create happier, inspiring spaces in our home, and then also how to have a stress-free move, which I know is a very challenging topic and concept for a lot of us. So let's welcome Theresa. To start out, could you please give us a brief overview of your background?
Hi, everybody. I'm Theresa. I am a intentional home organizer, like Laura mentioned, a marriage family therapist, and an energy healer, so multi-passionate human. I guide purpose-driven people to release mental and physical clutter to create an energetically aligned and organized space. And really, that is what lights me up, helping people not only get to the root of like having an organized and nurturing space, but also feeling whole within yourself. So both your inner world and your external world are in sync and flow and peaceful.
I love that. Already makes me feel so much better. I'm so happy you're here with us tonight. And for all of you at home, again, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And we're going to get started with our questions that we've collected from some of our clients, some people on social media. So I'm excited. The very first one, just alluding to what you were talking to about creating that home that truly nurtures our soul. So what are some ways that we can create that inspiring and happier space in our homes?
I would say the first thing that I always tell people is to check in with yourself. Think about what you really like, how you live, and that will determine how you want to set up your space. So, for example, say, like in my personal space, I really like meditating. I really like doing breath work. So I knew that when I moved into my apartment, that was a space that I wanted to cultivate, a place for me to come in, be relaxed, have like silence and go inward. For some people, that might be like a home gym or a creative office space. It could be you want a garden in your backyard, or maybe an expansive dining room. You like to invite guests over and entertain people. So, really thinking about what lights you up in your house and your life.
I love that. And I may be in trouble because I like all of those things. Uh-oh. Anyways, I really like thinking about like your lifestyle and who you are as a person and then reflecting that in your
Yeah.
home. Thank you. So for then, obviously organization and decluttering is so important, but it's also a big, big challenge. And it's a big part of creating that happier home. So what practical systems do you have for us when it comes to just staying organized and decluttered without just having to work at it every single day?
Well, first of all, I would say trying to maybe shifting the mindset around it even because I feel like when we come to the space of, oh, I have to declutter, I have to organize, it feels like a chore and it feels like something that we don't want to do because it's on our to-do list. And so even shifting our mentality with that and saying, oh, I get to decide what I want around me. I get to decide the energies and the physical things that I want to keep in my home and love and cherish. And so like outside of that, outside of the mentality aspect, I would say doing it at small bits at a time
Mm.
because I think sometimes we have that idea in our mind. I mean, I know personally I look at Pinterest and I'm like, "Oh, that space like and I want it exactly how it is." And so that expectation of this is how it has to be, this is how it has to look like, it can be a lot of pressure on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So splitting up decluttering and the whole process of actually cultivating your home into smaller pieces so it feels manageable, so it feels good to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think Um, so a home, right? And we have all these different rooms, 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom home. And where do you recommend that people get started? Like, what is the room? If you wanted to kind of go bit by bit, what would you say first? Start with the worst, or um,
I would actually say start with the one that you have the least resistance to, just because that'll ease yourself into it and you'll be more excited to get started with the process. I feel
mm,
like the mental piece too, like the more that you think about things and the more you dread things, it grows in your mind and it becomes much bigger than it actually is.
yeah,
And so starting with something that you actually are really interested in auditing and organizing is the best place to start, in my opinion.
okay. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So now many people dread moving, but it is a very necessary thing. Again, whether you're a homeowner and you're looking to upsize or downsize, or you need to move to a different state, or you're renting and now you need to go from one place to the other. So, what are some tips that you can share with us for a stress-free move, or as less stressful as possible?
Yeah, again, I want to defer back to the same advice, like taking your time with it. So I feel like a lot of people, myself included, wait until like the last week or two before the move, just because we're busy and we have other things going on. So we don't make it a priority to pack and audit again. So I'd say even like maybe like a month or 2 months before starting the process and
Mm,
starting to get into like, what do I want to take with me to my new space? How do I want to feel in this new space? And knowing that transitions, they they're a changing period. So it's new to you. So that's where the stress comes in because you've never experienced being in this new space before. You've never experienced um the the kind of feelings and flow you're going to get with this new home. So even though it's really exciting
yeah.
and lights you up to like be moving to this new space, it does take a little bit of time to transition, especially with young kids and stuff too. Like so I would say like set yourself up for time, break things down again into small pieces. And I mean, there's more specific room, like I have tips for, per room on the moving guide that you guys are going to get after this. So I break it down, like, for example, like with the kitchen, you're going to want to get rid of expired items, or with bathroom products, you're going to want to get rid of like cleaning products that are no longer good. So, like, taking the time to assess like what steps you need to take and breaking them out over time will really help a lot with not having to do it all last minute.
Yeah, I love that you said at least 2 months in advance. We definitely wait till it's too late. Most people do. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think for everybody on here and everyone that's catching the replay, it's almost like um it is going to be stressful no matter what, just because it's a big transition and change, like you're saying. But the goal is, how do we avoid it? How do we avoid the stress and maybe reduce some of that stress, right? So yes, we're going to be sharing Theresa's guide, moving guide. So if you just moved into a new home, or if you're thinking about moving, upsizing, downsizing, this is going to be great to help you kind of organize all of those spaces. So let's talk about kids. I know you alluded to kids because it makes things even a little bit more difficult when it comes to making
Yeah.
a transition. But for kids areas, so what do you recommend when it comes to creating an inspiring, maybe play area and keeping it organized, and also encouraging the kids to keep it organized?
So I actually used to be a preschool teacher before I was an organizer, and
Oh,
I feel like kids don't need a lot of stuff. They actually really thrive when they have minimal things because they get to use their imagination.
yeah.
Like when you're seeing kids at playing outside and they love to gather like sticks and rocks and stuff. Like that
Yeah.
is the most basic thing that somebody could play with, but like they get so much joy out of it because they're cultivating a story with it.
Mm,
And so allowing, I would say, like, if your kid is on the older side too, allowing them to be a part of the process, like asking them, like, what do you want your room to be like? What do you want your playroom to include?
mhm.
And of course, like you're probably not going to be able to grant them all their wishes that they
Mhm.
say, but listening to them, because that's going to give them the excitement and also the independence to help cultivate that space too.
Mhm.
Um, and I would also say, like, make it so that it's easily accessible, like items are easily accessible for them. Thinking about, the more practical things, like, can my child reach their clothes, or, how are they going to grab things? Like, for example, like sometimes I see parents stacking books on top of each other, but like that could be like a really challenging thing for a young kid, right? Like
Mhm.
pulling one of their favorite books out of the middle, like it's going to fall down. So thinking about like the practical steps, like how to make it easy as possible for them to be involved in the process, and like even just like 1 to 2 steps with like cleanup and organizing too, like anything past that, I feel like they're gonna be overwhelmed, they're not gonna wanna do it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you have the preschool experience. It's like the best of both worlds when it comes to this question. But okay, so they don't need as much as we think they do. I love that. And then two, just making it easy for them to access and also just keep organized by making it reachable and accessible to them.
For
Yeah.
example, I think like with pictures and stuff too, like if you're gonna have any sort of bins with their toys in them, if
Mhm.
they're under a certain age where they can't read, really having pictures that say like or show this is what's gonna be in that bin, and maybe even taking a
Mm,
picture of their exact toy and be like, this is what goes in that bin. And really having the patience with them, because it's going to
mhm.
be a process, it's going to be them learning. So
Yeah.
making it fun, like making it into turning it into a game, like, oh, like let's see if we can clean up this up within the timer or something, like maybe set like a 10-second timer, and making it more fun will have them want to be involved in the process and cultivate that for themselves too.
Yeah, I love that tip of the picture or image as the label for that container. So it's easy for them to, go back to. Thank you. So some of our viewers are thinking about moving. I think we talked a little bit about this when it comes to the stress-free move, but specifically downsizing. So for anybody that, is coming from a 5-bed, 4-bed home, and now, they don't need as much space going to a 2-bed, that can sound very overwhelming just because you have years and years of things. So what are
Totally.
some, considerations or tips that you have for people that are transitioning to a smaller space?
I actually started my business living in a loft. I downsized a ton because I moved across the country. I had to like audit my whole life pretty much.
Yeah.
And so that really, I have a lot of personal experience and professional experience with this, but again, like considering what's most important to you, because you're really gonna you're gonna have to downsize and pare down on your items. So thinking about like, what do I want to keep around me? What do I use the most? And then thinking about the space, because a lot of the time we can use things like vertical space, or there's a certain way that we can configure the layout to add more value and like sizing in it. So for
Mhm.
example, with the loft, I use a lot of vertical space. I use shelving, I used hooks, things like, for my desk area, I had like a fold up desk. So it wasn't always seen, it wasn't always down, taking up a lot of room. So thinking about like, where can I save space in, oh, and furniture too. That adds, like you can have furniture that doubles as storage also, like ottomans, or, I have a chest that I use that it was both a decorative piece and also I used it for storage. So thinking about like,
Mm.
where can I save space and how can I use the whole entire house to organize and set up my stuff.
Yeah, getting creative. I think that's definitely something that, when we're, let's say somebody's selling their bigger house and they need to downsize, I think there's a lot of resistance on like, this is such a smaller layout, but it's obviously what
Mhm.
they need now, right? What their lifestyle
Yeah.
needs now. But it's just about where do we fit all the things? So going back, prioritizing what's actually important, and then getting creative with the smaller space. So yeah, like you said, sometimes furniture pieces can have double, triple use, or maybe like creating even storage space behind a door that you never were. It's going to be different than your larger home.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are
And there are
great
even
call-outs.
stackable bins that you can get. So that's the sort of things that I'm talking about. If you have like stackable bins and you keep stuff on the very top that you don't really use a lot, say like maybe it's like holiday items or winter clothes or, things that aren't going to be like you're not going to need to access them right away or on an
Mhm.
everyday basis. You can
Yeah.
always think about like, how can I move things upward?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's take some questions from the viewers. So again, if you're out there, drop your questions in the chat. Don't be shy. We have Theresa here to answer all of our questions. So I have a question here. For organization, I often struggle to envision the space I have. Are there any websites or apps you recommend to help me manage, to help me map out and do visual storage of areas like closets?
Yeah, definitely. So I actually just created another guide for this. It has like practical tips as far as space layout goes. But
Mm,
I would say like one of the main things that comes to mind for me is thinking about like the larger items first and working the space around them because they're going to take up the most space and they're also going to be the most awkward to configure in the entire layout.
mm,
And so maybe even just like considering categorizing your items and thinking, what types of items do I have? Say I have coats, say I have jeans, I have my shoes, and actually making like a physical map like on like a piece of paper or something and seeing like how is this going to flow, like is this going to work with my everyday routine. So like for example, keeping things that you use every day at eye level or easily accessible, and again like what I was saying, things that you don't use that frequently you can put like upward, or I never like to recommend under the bed, but that's always an option too. I know some people
mm.
prefer that.
Yeah,
Um,
anything specifically to kind of map out a space though? I know you said you have a guide, but I know people are just so used to like now the
yeah,
apps and websites. Anything that you've used that you would recommend, or maybe we can follow up on that.
I don't really have an app. I mean, it's because this is a piece that like it's very specific to your space, right? And so I'm not really sure about an app, but I would just say like the tips that I've already said, like thinking about the larger items and working around that, thinking about like the, yeah, like the stuff I already mentioned. I'm sorry that I don't have an app or anything that comes to mind,
No,
but
you're good. You're completely good. I think it's like the key here is, okay, you have a space, you have a new layout. What is the big key items, large items that you definitely want to bring with you? And
yeah,
then kind of like organizing around that. So
yeah.
yeah, I think that's definitely a great way to think about it. So, I just moved into a new house. How can we, sorry. Okay. I just moved into a new house. How can we accept that it may be empty in places and avoid spending money to just fill it in?
Hmm. That's such a great question. I really think that like shifting your mindset and thinking about like I'm cultivating this space and I want to have pieces around me that really represent who I am becoming.
Mm,
And reminding yourself of that when you go to like what say you see ads or something, coming back to that piece and saying, is this really going to represent who I'm becoming in the house that I'm trying to cultivate right now? And I think a lot of the suggestions that I give clients too is like that piece of reflection and that reminder of being intentional with your purchases, even staying like even everyday organization, right? And like creating a house, it's about being intentional with, do I really need and want this? Am I really going to love and find appreciation and joy for this item? And it does take some adjustment if you're used to having filling a space and having it full, like, but just supporting yourself in that way of knowing like this is how intentional you're being. And you could maybe even have like an affirmation or like a post-it somewhere that says like I'm being intentional with my purchases, to remind yourself of that piece of things.
yeah. Yeah, it's funny how, people think, oh, I have this space and I need to fill it in. And almost like in the real estate world, we're like, how can we get rid of things and clear as much space as possible just because it looks and feels so much more open? So would you say that's actually like that empty space is actually an advantage in a house?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I would say if anything, if you want to fill something, like you could get some plants or something, some piece of nature to bring in because nature always calms and grounds us in the space. So if you're feeling the itch to get something, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah. And then, yeah, and hopefully that's not too expensive, right? When it comes to
Yeah.
overspending. All right. For I think to wrap up the conversation, if you can share with us a success story from one of, clients that came to you with a problem, how you guided them through the process and some of their results.
So the one that comes to mind for me off the top of my head is this mom, the single mom that I worked with. She was just really in a space of chaos and, like as a single parent, she has a lot to do, a lot to manage. And so I worked with her in various spaces of her house. And for example, like her kids' playroom, when we went through and organized her kids' space, we pulled out a guitar that was in the back of the closet. And the next day, her and her kids, they played with the guitar. They like recognized that it was there. They spent that quality time together. And they really realized, like, she realized that she was able to be more present with them. So that's like one big thing that I always see with clients, like quality time. Um, and also money. Like I feel like people save money when I've seen a few clients save money when they don't aren't double buying things. They
Mm,
know exactly their inventory and the stock that they have. So it's like
yeah.
all,
Totally. Thanks for sharing that. I think I just received another question, and it's
yeah.
sort of about how do you have that conversation if you have multiple family members, if you want to get the house in order, you want to start organizing and decluttering, how to best have that conversation from a place of just love and understanding versus it creating some friction.
Totally. I totally get this. And it can be challenging when you live with a lot of people or just even two people because you might have different opinions than them. So I would always suggest doing what I call a gentle startup. And this is a therapist technique, a Gottman technique. If you are interested in like anything to do with the couples realm, I highly suggest looking up Dr. John and Julie Gottman. They're amazing. But they basically share that coming to the conversation like when you're grounded, when you are not feeling frantic and overwhelmed, and
Mm,
taking the time to check in with your partner or your roommate or even your kids and saying, are you ready and open to have a conversation about X or a conversation about Y? And I would really suggest like just sticking with one topic in particular, because if we start going off on like this and that, then it can be really overwhelming. And like knowing that you're not always going to agree and that's okay. Like you can have multiple conversations around it because ultimately it's their space too, right? So like
mm,
it's
yeah.
really coming together and recognizing and appreciating what you do agree on and appreciating who that person is like outside of what they want in this space.
Yeah, I love that. And again, everybody, we're going to be sending you a replay of this session. If you wanted to share it with somebody else in your family, if they're open and ready to maybe listen to this conversation, and then that freebie that's going to give you a checklist on how to have a stress-free move or maybe how to organize better if you're just moving into a new home. But Theresa, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on with us. Everybody, thank you for your questions. And again, we have two more parts of this series. Next Tuesday, we're going to be with Aisha Williams, who is a state planning attorney. And we're going to have that conversation as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. Thank you, Theresa, as well. And we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.